why do you make your own compost?
We make our own compost because in our area there's no good source for a high quality organic or close to organic compost that we've found. So we kind of resorted to making our own as much as possible. And we're fortunate that we have input from the animal manure, from our sheep, and then all the vegetable matter that comes out of our gardens, cleaning up and pulling out beds and stuff that we can use to make a good compost here. But if there were a really good source of organic compost somewhere else, we'd love to get it somewhere else, but we've decided to make our own.
Like, what do you think the best soil amendments are?
We do soil tests that we send in at least once a year on each of our different plots. So one thing that we're looking at is organic matter, in the percentage of organic matter in the soil. And when you're low on that is really when you need to be adding more compost to get the organic matter and the kind of life of the soil built up. We're actually at the point here with most of our plots where that number, the percentage organic matter, is at a pretty good spot. So we're not having to add a lot of compost unless we're planting a really heavy feeder like tomatoes or cucumbers, which require a lot from the soil to produce these big, beautiful fruit. In contrast, like a lettuce or something like that is a light feeder.
Right.
It's just producing leaves. It's not like needing all of this nutrition to produce the ultimate crop. So sometimes with the heavier feeders, we do apply compost.
Okay.
And then other amendments that we use just come from the soil test results, showing if we're deficient in any certain mineral or I can't think of the word or element in the soil. So like we are adding copper at a really small level because soils in this area tend to be deficient in copper. We also add organic, kind of what would be considered organic fertilizers to each bed before planting. So that's just something like organic alfalfa meal is a source of nitrogen, which helps plants grow. Yeah.
For a novice gardener, where would you like suggest someone get their soil?
Soil, you can get good soil depending on the space you need to fill, either by the bag or like the truckload at different garden centers, and they'll have like a premium soil blend usually. And then if you're just starting your garden, I'd recommend mixing in like a third of it probably should be compost. And just completely mixing that into your soil mix.
So where would you get compost then?
There's a few sources that again, you can get it by the bag. There's organic compost at the garden centers, or if you need to get a truckload, you can get that at the garden centers here, or there's Wins up at the dump, or this guy Dennis O'Brien down on Glendale.
So who do you most like distribute your produce to?
Well, so about a third of our produce goes to our CSA members. Those are families that sign up in the beginning of the year to get a weekly share of our harvest. And so it changes each week what they're getting, depending on what time of season it is. But they get that for 18 weeks. And then another third goes to the farmers market. So it's local people and tourists coming and shopping, buying whatever they want at our stand in Ketchum. And then the last third goes to our wholesale accounts, which are Atkinson's, Nourish Me, and then about 10 restaurants throughout the valley.
That's cool. I think that the biggest impact is on having a successful yield.
That's a really hard question. For like a home gardener?
Yeah.
I would recommend that home gardeners not be afraid to harvest their plants. I feel like a lot of times new gardeners like don't cut things back or take the fruit off, and then they miss it And it's like the cucumber got too big and then it didn't taste good anymore, or they didn't cut their lettuce or their basil back and then it got all like leggy and tall and not productive anymore. So to get a good yield, you actually have to like more actively manage it and take the stuff it's producing so that it will then produce more, instead of just like kind of go on to the next stage of its life, which is producing flowers and seeds, which is not usually the priority. Yeah. I think proper spacing is really important for home gardeners, not putting things too close together so that they all kind of like crowd each other out and don't produce very well. So anytime you buy a plant or seeds, it'll give you information on kind of the proper, how far apart it's supposed to be from other things.
Yeah. So what do you think the easiest and the hardest things to grow are?
Around here in our climate, well, it's really easy to grow zucchinis. Everyone can grow zucchini and like get more than you'll ever eat. Tomatoes are hard around here just because our season is so short that it's sometimes hard to get many ripe tomatoes before it's getting cold again in the end of the summer. Other easy things are like snap peas and green beans, like kale and chard and other greens like that are pretty easy too.
And would you suggest starting with like a seed or a start?
It really depends on the crop.
Okay.
Do your research. Like, some things are super easy to start from seed and there's no reason you should ever have to buy a start, like beans and peas, lettuce most of the time, and other greens like arugula and radishes that are really fast. But then things like tomatoes and cucumbers that take the whole season to produce, in an area like this where we have such a short summer, if you're not buying a start that's already like a month or so old by the time you're going to put it in the ground in your home garden, there's no chance that you're going to get a harvest off of it in time.
Right.
Unless you have a space like inside that you can start your own tomato seed in March and baby it up until May or June when it's appropriate to put it outside here.
So when do you plant?
Again, it depends on the crop. You should look at dates to maturity, or every crop will have information on days to maturity. A radish is like the fastest thing, and that's 28 days. And so you just can count back from that and say like, okay, it makes sense with the weather, and I would love to have a crop of radishes on July 28th, 28 days, or let's say June 28th. 28 days before that is June 1st, that's when I'm gonna plant my radish seeds.
Okay.
Versus like tomatoes, again, trickier, much longer to produce. Days to maturity is gonna be like 70.
Right.
And so if you're starting it from seed on your own, and you're like, okay, I'm gonna try my hardest to get ripe tomatoes by August 15th, count back 70 days.
Right.
And that's when you need to start it inside. If you're buying starts for those types of things, the people like us that are starting the starts for you will have taken that into account.
Right.
The timing. But there's things that you can do over and over throughout the summer, like radishes. Like you can plant them every 15 days, and then 28 days from each of those plantings you'll have radishes. So that way, instead of getting one crop of radishes, you'll have them to eat these different successions all summer. So any of the shorter things you can get in, it's called successions, multiple plantings and harvests in one season.
Right. Okay. For a novice gardener, what would be your most helpful piece of advice?
For a novice gardener, I would say start with like 4 or 5 crops and really do your research on your timing, days to maturity, spacing, and try to do them well. I think often beginner gardeners want to like do everything, and then they don't think about how each crop has different needs and different schedules and everything, and then can get discouraged by like, none of my stuff worked. But I think if you focus on a few things and really try to hone in on those, then you'll have more success.